Hello and welcome to WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. I'm George Upper, editor-in-chief of the Western Journal. I'm joined today by Michael Austin, features reporter, and Josh Manning, I almost forgot your name, Josh, our deputy managing editor.
Thank you, Bill.
I only work with him every day, folks. We have a lot of fantastic news for you and updates and commentary. We're going to start this afternoon with a quick discussion about why we have not yet called this race, although most other media outlets have. We talked about this some last week about what we were waiting for, and we're continuing to wait, and why Donald Trump still has a path to victory as we see it. So Dick Morris, who's a frequent op-ed contributor to the Western Journal. He's been in politics for forever, former advisor to Bill Clinton during his presidency, now writes more from the perspective of the Republicans. He published an op-ed on Western Journal this weekend that laid out the case for why Donald Trump may still have a path to win the presidency in 2020. And he had a number of points, and I want to run through some of the more salient points here very quickly and update a few of the numbers that he provided. We've had a few updates since that came out. One thing to keep in mind as I do this, no matter who is predicting, who's calling this race, who's predicting a Biden victory, we need to remember that that's all it is at this point. It is just a prediction. When the AP, Associated Press, says, we've called the presidential race for Joe Biden, that's fine. That's the Associated Press saying we're pretty sure Joe Biden's going to be the next president. It's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But it doesn't make him the winner. There's nothing official about that call. It's a prediction. It's some people actually call it a bet. They're betting that Joe Biden's going to win this race. That's certainly possible. We certainly can't rule out that possibility. But the only thing that matters, really, is when the states certify their results in the Electoral College votes on December 14th. So we're still 2 months out, we're still a month out from that, more than a month out from that. And then Congress gets together and counts the electoral votes officially in early January, I think on the 6th. Those are the dates that matter. All this other stuff is just their predictions. It's preliminary. So let's talk about what is still going on in this race. There are recounts that are almost certainly going to happen. One has been announced essentially in Georgia. Arizona is probably going to see one as well. According to Dick Morris's analysis, most of the likely errors that are going to be found in these recounts are going to be on mailed-in ballots. Machine votes are just harder to mess with. Yeah. Now, Biden won upwards of 2/3 of mail-in votes and absentee ballots in both of those states. So it's likely, just kind of what we loosely refer to as the law of averages, says that most of the discarded mail ballots, if any, will be subtracted from Biden's total, assuming that breaks about even. So gaps. Any pro-Biden gaps in either of those states are likely to be made smaller by any recounts of those. That would, so that could really throw a monkey wrench in things for Joe Biden. And if I'm Joe Biden right now, I'm in the Biden camp. I'm nervous because there are a lot of things going on that could weigh against Joe Biden in the next few weeks. So right now, the networks are giving Trump 214 electoral votes. We're giving him 229 because we called North Carolina on election night. I think that is going to hold. I don't see that changing. So that puts him at 229. Alaska is, we've got about 61% of the vote in. It's about 2-1 Trump. It is mathematically possible for Biden to take that, but it's very unlikely at this point. So let's give those three over to Trump as well. That brings him to 232. Now, Arizona, we're seeing Trump's deficit shrinking. It's down to about 17,000 votes today. Biden's up by 17,000. We got about 75,000-ish votes, maybe a few more, maybe a few less to count. And most of the vote has been breaking for Trump in Arizona. So once that's fully counted and possibly recounted, depending on how short or how close that is, if that goes Trump's way, that gives him 243. That is certainly not out of the question. Georgia, Biden again leading there, but we're going to see a recount. That would be 16 votes. If Trump wins that one, that would bring him to 259. Now, here's where it gets really fun. Wisconsin, Biden won by 21,000 votes, according to most estimates right now. But a recanvass is going to happen in Wisconsin. The recanvassing procedure was actually created by Scott Walker, Governor Scott Walker, and it's very transparent and very fair. Dick Morris called it a model for the nation, and he's not wrong about that. Scott Walker believes, or according to Dick Morris, Scott Walker told him that this process could very well flip the state for Trump. 21,000 votes is not much of a margin. If if all of the above happens, that gives Trump 269 electoral college votes, which means Joe Biden would have 269.
Back in danger territory.
Exactly. Yep. We'd be tied. Dick called that one vote shy of victory, but I actually have to disagree with him there.
That is victory.
Yeah, a tie is victory because a tie goes to the House, and the House, each state gets one vote in the House. It's not each representative, it's each state. And more states have a Republican majority in the House than a Democratic majority, and so the House will vote for Trump if it is tied. But that doesn't count 3 other states that could potentially go Trump's ways. Pennsylvania, with its 20 electoral votes, that would, of course, be huge. There are lawsuits filed there. There is the big talk right now is the state Supreme Court ordered that provisional ballots be counted if they arrive before Friday, November 6th, as long as they were postmarked by November 3rd. The problem with that is the Constitution doesn't give state Supreme Court any jurisdiction over this process. The Constitution very clearly says that the legislatures, state legislatures, determine how electors to the Electoral College are decided upon. So it is, in my opinion, very likely that the federal Supreme Court of the United States, will overturn that ruling and throw out something like 160,000 late ballots,
which will be devastating, presumably devastating, given where they're coming from.
Exactly, because these were all mailed-in ballots, largely mailed-in ballots, and because
devastating to Biden. Pardon me.
Yes, exactly. And because Donald Trump railed against mail-in voting, he just didn't get a lot of mail-in votes because he spent 2 months saying how crooked mail-in voting is. So, of course, his voters showed up in person. They might have voted early, but they didn't mail them in. So any mail-in ballots that are thrown out en masse like that is almost certainly going to help Donald Trump. So Pennsylvania is not out of the picture yet. Nevada is not yet out of the picture. And even Michigan is not yet out of the picture because it's the Republican leaders in the Michigan legislature have said that they're going to be auditing the process there. So there are a number of potential paths to victory, either to 269 or to 270 electoral votes. And Donald Trump is most certainly not out of this yet. So throwing all that out there, guys, where do you see Trump's most likely pickups, if any, in these states? And then my real question, though, is what happens if it does turn around and this coronation of Joe Biden is interrupted, midway through?
So I'm not positive where the pickups will be. Somebody else and I in the newsroom were talking about this earlier today, and I generally know the things I know. I definitely know what I don't know, and I don't know nearly enough to be able to predict what states he might pick up. The second question you asked is far more interesting to me, and that's what happens if the coronation not only gets paused but gets reversed. It's a funny thing. I was talking with my 14-year-old daughter about this over the weekend.
14 already, wow.
Yeah, they grow fast. Yeah. It was a funny thing. Back in the 90s, there was definite animosity between the right and the left. Rush was hitting Clinton pretty hard.
Right.
But there was nothing in the 90s like what was going to happen in 2000 after Bush v. Gore. And I think over time, conservatives sort of in the chattering classes came to recognize that's where derangement on the left really started, at Bush v. Gore. They thought they had it. They had spent a month planning how they were going to administer the country, and then for it to be pulled out from under them by the Supreme Court, or is in their version of it. That absolutely, whatever has happened to them got pathologized then. If it happens again, I don't know where that leaves us. I mean, I truly don't, because the difference between Democrats in the 70s, 80s, and even 90s and Democrats in the 20s, teens, and now going into the 2020s, it's night and day. In the past, you were, we just disagreed. Now we're Nazis. Where do you go after accusing someone of Nazism? What's the next step after that? And I'm afraid we're going to find out if this happens. And the more the media legitimizes Biden's claim to the presidency, the worse this is going to be. The media could put the brakes on this in a heartbeat and say, whoa, wait a minute, everybody slow down. Yeah. We're playing a very dangerous game here. American politics started coming apart the first time we did this in 2000. This could rip us in too. Then the media will be complicit in whatever damage comes out of this.
We've seen a lot of calls for unity from the left over the past 2 days, from Joe Biden and
then they call hotlines for voter fraud that are manned by conservatives and call them the C word, call them all sorts of other things.
Exactly.
That's going to put Trump supporters on the list.
That's unity.
For
that's
4
unity
years,
right there.
For 4 years, I've been called Hitler, and now they want to be friends with Hitler. And I mean, I don't understand why I'd want to be their friend after 4 years of being called Hitler. I don't understand why they'd want to be my friend if they really think I'm Hitler. So where do we go from here, Michael?
I don't know. It's going to be a tough road ahead if it flips. Like if that were to happen, I have my serious doubts that there's enough votes out there. There could be in the thousands in plenty of states, I think, but a total flip seems a little unrealistic to me. But if it were to happen, it's got to be like George Floyd 2.0. Like I can't. They would just go nuts. Yeah, that would be insane.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens.
I think it will break them. I think it will break them. I think they were somewhat broken after Bush v. Gore, and I don't know how you come back from. I don't know how you come back from that again. It will be so traumatic for them.
Well,
they're not expecting it.
What's really interesting is from Dick Morris's analysis is he doesn't use the word voter fraud in here, or the phrase, voter fraud in here once. He's just talking about a recount of what, looking at ballots, looking at things manually that were counted electronically. Yep. And throwing out some ballots that maybe shouldn't have been counted, that kind of thing. Voter fraud doesn't even come into it for him.
So that dovetails super well with a couple things I've been looking at. Don Jr. A couple of days ago tweeted, "When America sees everything we're uncovering," I think we've got this tweet, maybe we can put on screen. "When America sees everything we're uncovering, they'll be disgusted, and even the media won't be able to pretend voter fraud isn't real. Ending this crap once and for all will be fundamental to preserving our republic and our faith in democracy." So you've got Trump Jr. saying that there's just rampant voter fraud. We've seen people all over in conservative circles saying that it's rampant. In fact, buzzing around on Twitter right now as Kayleigh McEnany was cut off by Neil Cavuto on Fox when she started talking about voter fraud everywhere, and Cavuto just sort of cut her off. I want to go to a quick clip of Senator Lindsey Graham. I think we've got that queued up. Let's run that, and then we want to come back and talk about it. It's about a 30-second clip. Can we
The
take that?
FBI is investigating it along with the postal inspector, and our committee will be talking to this gentleman. I don't know where that goes, but I do know that we have evidence of 6 people in Pennsylvania registering after they died and voting after they died, and we haven't looked at the entire system. So to my Republican colleagues out there, we have to fight back or we will accept our fate. I want Pennsylvania to explain to the American people how 6 people after they die, can register and vote in Pennsylvania. I want the computer systems in Michigan that flip votes from Republicans to Democrats to be looked at, and the software was used all over the country.
So Don Jr.'s alleging rampant voter fraud. You've got Lindsey Graham talking about dead people who not only managed to vote, they also managed to register to vote.
That's impressive.
And these are the kind of things that get amplified on Twitter like crazy, but it turns out it's only 6 people.
Right.
It's only 6 people
Right.
Graham's talking about. So, guys, I would put to you that I think there really is a chance that the outcome of this shifts from what the media thinks. I think there's at least a 50-50 shot Trump does win. I don't think he wins based on this idea of rampant voter fraud and Sharpies and these things.
Yeah.
I think he wins based on challenging the things we warned about ahead of time, which was mail-in votes, ballot harvesting, unconstitutional counts, and those sorts of things. And I think conservatives need to take a step back and say, well, hang on. We're going to try this in the courts. If there really were 100,000 people who were dead and still voted and registered to vote, it's going to come out in the court cases.
Of course.
But we need to stop throwing this stuff around when there's no basis for it. What do you guys think?
I think it's a lot easier to yell fraud than it is to yell unconstitutional.
Yeah.
Because unconstitutional it's sexier, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe people can go to jail. Do people go to jail for violating the Constitution? I don't know. But that requires education and it requires thought. Okay, and I don't mean to.
We're very emotional right now. People
absolutely,
are very emotional.
and I don't mean to insult anybody at all. But it's just easier. It's intellectually easier to yell fraud,
Yep.
and it's much more understandable. That's an argument. You don't have to explain fraud, right? Fraud is fraud. He lied. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Making an argument about Section 2, Article 4, or whatever. That's just a different thing. You automatically lose some people with that. And honestly, there's even some on the right. There's been so much pushback against the expert class that some of that even gets caught up in there wrongfully, but it gets caught up in there. Well, why should I listen to a constitutional expert like Chris Ann Hall? She's just another expert. Well, because she's an expert. That's why you should listen to her. But she's an expert who is opining in her area of expertise in a rational and thoughtful way, as opposed to somebody who says, for instance, they're arguing for climate change, which really all you can do is argue for models. You can't argue for anything that's happened because it hadn't happened. So that people arguing, well, the experts have reached a consensus on climate change. Well, science doesn't work that way. Consensus is literally meaningless.
Yeah.
That's not what a constitutional expert would argue. A constitutional expert would never say, well, the consensus of constitutional experts. No, they go to the Constitution. But that takes thought. That takes reason and logic. And that's just harder than it is to yell fraud.
Well, Michael, do you think in the as the Trump administration, or as the Trump campaign, prosecutes these things in court, do you think if there is real significant voter fraud, we all know there's voter fraud and voter fraud every time around, but significant real voter fraud, do you think it's going to come out in the courts?
I think it will. I have confidence in this system, and from what I've heard from the Trump campaign and Giuliani, as much as you can trust him sometimes, but from what I've heard is they can.
I like Giuliani, and he told me if you disparaged him, he was going to go find a laptop.
Oh no!
You dropped off.
I forgot
about. Yeah,
I dropped that. Laptop off
that was
ago.
the lesson. Sorry, just as an aside, that was
you
the lesson.
Never signed for that.
That was the lesson with the whole Hunter Biden laptop thing. It was not "don't forget your laptop." It was not any of that. It was that when Giuliani goes radio silent for 6 months, he is coming back up with a nuke. Sorry.
But
Keep going.
What seems to be the case is that my initial worry was that they couldn't track where all of these ballots came from. From what I've heard, they can track pretty much like a significant portion of them. So if there's fraud, they're going to be able to find it. Again, I don't know if it's widespread enough to overturn anything, but even with that being said, mail-in ballots are a serious problem. And yeah, we'll have to see what happens.
Well, and it could be that, some of these races are so tight, and you do a recount and maybe it gets a little tighter.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden maybe a few hundred fraudulent ballots actually are material. Maybe they are enough.
Yep.
It doesn't have to
good
be
point.
a lot. So, there's a lot still to come.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And moving on a little bit and just kind of calling back to what we were saying about Biden calling for unity and for everyone to be together.
Yes.
Unity, you jerks.
I actually saw
Unity.
I saw some. I don't know if this is true, but somebody on Twitter said that in his speech he promised to restore our souls.
Yes.
So there's a whole Psalm
so
23
messy.
thing
Finally,
going on
Messianic
there.
figure.
He
Yeah.
restores our souls.
So there is an enormous problem in America. Just as a complete aside, this started with Obama. The seas were going to stop
Messiah,
rising.
right.
This messianic kind of view of him, and then this similar thing happened with Trump because people were so ready for someone who was an anti-politician and a populist, and someone who would stand up and speak truth to power. Forgive me for using that phrase, and
That's true.
and things like that. And now we're seeing the same thing with Biden. There's this weird messianism that's showing back up in American politics,
people-
and it's
People want
disturbing.
a God to follow, and they're either going to follow the true God or they're going to follow a false one. And when somebody comes up, especially, I think it's particularly easy on the left, although you're dead right, Josh. We've seen it on the right also. When people come up and say, I'm going to solve all your problems, well, there's only one guy who can solve all our problems. And Joe Biden ain't him. He can't restore my soul. My soul's been restored already. Anyway, sorry, Michael.
No,
We're
it's all
stepping
good.
all over your segment.
And, to fill that spiritual gap that's in America, the left has offered a lot of strange religious philosophies like critical race theory, which, if he becomes president, if and when, one of Biden's first orders of business will be to overturn an executive order from the Trump administration to ban critical race theory from being taught at federal institutions. Now, I have a lot of notes on this, so I'm just going to try to break this down really quickly. For those that don't understand what critical race theory is, it sounds overly complicated. It's an ideology written by a bunch of academics who think they're smarter than everyone else. But when you get down to the core, it's really simple what it is. Critical race theory is undergirded with the belief that everything is about race. Everyone is motivated by race. Every institution is put into place to give one race power over another. And then the second thing critical race theory posits is that the dominant race in American society, which they would say is white, uses systems and different institutions to assert their racial dominance, and that's called systemic racism. And then here's where you really start to see how fraudulent these people are, is systemic racism to them is kind of in everything and it's everywhere, but it's unseen and it's hidden below the surface. It's kind of like the Force from Star Wars.
Right.
It's in everything. And if you want to identify it, and if you want to learn the tools to fight it, you got to buy their books. You got to pay for their teaching seminars. And you
It's
gotta
just
learn
like
from them.
Scientology.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which reveals
that is. You're describing
the
Scientology.
actual motivation behind most people's actions, which is capitalism, not critical
Yes.
race theory, but
Yes.
that's okay.
And some of these tools that they're using are historical revisionism. So the 1619 Project, it's been debunked by historical scholars.
Right.
Discourse analysis. So basically saying any interaction from a white person to a black person is the white person asserting racial dominance. So like if a white police officer arrests a black person, that's him being a white supremacist oppressor. Ironically enough, if it's a black police officer, he's also a white supremacist oppressor because he is forwarding a white supremacist agenda of the police force.
Well,
Got that
right.
tied up in a nice, tidy little bow,
Yeah,
don't they?
that's handy.
But just put it all just simply, it's all about theoretical interpretation. So basically these academics get to make up whatever they want
Sure.
about racism and all this stuff. And Joe Biden is in favor. It's really likely that he's going to overturn this executive order and allow this stuff to get back into federal institutions. It's going to gain more power. These people are going to get more money. And it's going to create more racial animus in a country that is getting increasingly divided by race.
Right.
So I just want to throw that to you guys. What do you guys think about, he calls for unity, and then it's likely he's going to push an ideology. I mean, during the second debate, he pretty much defended critical race theory. So he's pushing an ideology that tells white people that they're inherently oppressors that need to beg forgiveness for their sins. So what is this? Is Joe Biden really about unity, or is he about just kind of catering to the whims of the radical left?
Well, I'm not sure about that, but he's a hypocrite because he should step aside and let a woman of color be president because
Right.
he's obviously performing his
white male privilege.
the role he plays in the male patriarchy. Yeah. I mean, it's absolute bunk. I don't think Biden believes it. I don't think Biden believes it at all. I think it's a useful tool for him.
Yeah, so critical race theory has much of its origin in literature and in the interpretation of literature, which had to change. Has been changing remarkably for the past 70 years or so because people had to have new stuff to write about. Academics had to, it all kind of. There's only so many ways you can write about Edgar Allan Poe. Unless you invent new ways to interpret Edgar Allan Poe. And so that's a big piece of where this kind of stuff came from. And as a English grad student, I studied this stuff years ago and actually enjoyed, from a theoretical viewpoint of here are different ways to look at stuff. That's kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. But the idea that we all make decisions about race, that race is the undergirding condition of man is just blatantly false. It just is not. It allows for no room for the idea of, and I know I'm racist when I say this, but colorblindness, the idea that there is a person out there who just doesn't care about race on no matter what your race is, that it's not possible that you don't care about somebody else's race. It also disallows what is really the core of these issues. And look, does racism exist? Sure. Yeah. Are there institutions that were designed in a way that favored races over other races? Of course there were. I mean, you really can't argue that.
Yeah.
Is the issue there racism? No, that's not the core issue. The core issue is sin. The core issue is that I want what I want for myself more than I want you to get what you want for yourself. That's the basic condition of man, of unredeemed man. And that is a condition that capitalism deals with beautifully.
That's where I was headed.
Yeah, by saying, you know what I want for myself. But you know what? To get what I want for myself, to get ahead, to be successful financially, materially, whatever, to leave an inheritance for my children and my children's children, as the Bible tells me I should, I have to serve you, because that's really what capitalism is about. It's not about greed. Yeah. Greed's a piece of it in the sense of self-interest. But no successful capitalist can be successful without serving somebody else. I have to have something you want. I have to create some value that you're interested in, which means I have to think about you. It's not a selfless system, but it is a very other-oriented system. And critical race theory, Marxism, when critical race theory really is just Marxism, take class out and put race in there, it's the same thing.
Yes.
None of those systems work the way capitalism does, because capitalism both acknowledges that inherent selfishness of man and harnesses it to serve others, which is absolutely brilliant. And it's the only system that does that. It's the only system, I think, that can do that.
Yes, and it's based on colorblind cooperation.
That's right. Racism actually hurts the capitalist in capitalism.
It does. It's always been really silly to me, this idea that women are paid less for the same amount of work and the same women with the same qualifications and these things. Because that means then that you've got CEOs whose main goal is to make money. You have them choosing to pay men more,
right,
when they could get the exact same quality work for less.
Right.
That
seems unlikely.
There are a few people who are so whose hatred for different kinds of people is an animus, and they would do that. But the issue is the market's also self-correcting now. Can you imagine setting up we are here in Phoenix. Can you imagine setting up a business in downtown Phoenix and saying that you don't allow blacks or you don't allow Jews? You would maybe be in business for a week before market forces just destroyed you.
That's why Jim Crow laws had to be laws, because
if
you didn't make that the law of the land, it would have gone away all by itself.
Exactly. Yeah. So these things, when you leave people alone to just kind of cooperate with each other, they generally do. Right. Where you end up having wars and things like that, or when larger political interests get involved or ideological interests get involved, and that's what this is. It's designed to divide and keep people at each other's throats, and that's what, while also claiming to be about justice and as Biden and his folks have been saying, about unity too. I mean, there was enormous amounts of propaganda in the Soviet Union about Soviet unity.
Oh, absolutely.
These things, while he was killing off Ukrainians, dealing with kulaks, destroying Georgians.
The Georgians, the Jews.
Exactly.
Always the Jews.
Always. So there's nothing new under the sun. This is just an old Marxist trope that's been trotted out again, and I guess sort of the academy has really fallen for it. It's showing up outside of English departments.
Absolutely. No.
And when anything in the English department gets loose, that's very dangerous.
Well, it's these diversity seminars that they may not be banned at federal institutions, but they're at businesses all over the place.
Sure.
A lot of people watching right now, you probably have experienced one of these diversity seminars in one way or another, or someone has. I know a lot of people close to me have in their workplaces, and it's some pretty horrible stuff. Anytime you hear the name Ibram Kendi, Kimberly Crenshaw, Robin DiAngelo, these are all people peddling this religious philosophy that's not based in any academic rigor or scientific process. It's all theory and it's all BS.
Right. Which is not to say that there isn't some value to be found in diversity. There isn't, or there isn't some value in stepping into somebody else's shoes. Sometimes those things can be valuable. I've had jobs where I've worked with very different people, and those very different people help me to see things in a different way than I would have on my own, based on my own background and experience. That's great. But I didn't need a seminar for me to do that. I just had to look at somebody and go, oh, you had a very different education than I did, a very different background than I did. I grew up white and male in the Northeast, and I had a woman who worked for me who was a few years older, black, grew up in North Carolina. Her growing up experience was very different than mine. And so the way she interacted with people was sometimes different than the way mine. Wasn't better, but it was different.
But that is based on a diversity of ideas.
Exactly.
Not anything else. Not
that's
skin
right.
color,
No.
not religion,
that's right.
nothing else. And that's the distinction. I've never been able to get anyone on the left. I have genuinely tried. I've asked people. I've never been able to get anyone on the left to explain to me why diversity, as defined by them, of
diversity of appearance,
sex or gender, of appearance, why that is actually a good thing. And I've never been able to get anybody to explain it to me. The diversity of ideas and viewpoints is interesting and useful.
Right.
That's what happens during education, during trade.
It gets conflated because there is a correlation. Right?
Exactly.
Between, if you looked at all of the black women of this woman's age who grew up in North Carolina, you could make some general statements about what their background and their upbringing and experience was probably like. And you looked at white males of my age who grew up in Massachusetts, you could make some generalizations about what our experiences would be like, and there'd be some commonalities there. But to conflate that with the idea that, black women then will bring a different perspective than white males, that's not the same thing.
But it's easy. Going back to the idea,
it's easier than actually thinking.
It's easy.
Oh, absolutely.
It's very easy. And Americans, we're going along here, but Americans, to their credit, they absolutely despise the original sin of slavery. They are trying desperately to figure out how to assuage their consciences.
Except for a few very backwards folks, you are 100% correct.
Do what?
Except for a few very backwards
except for
folks.
yes.
There's a small handful of morons in any group of people. So.
Yes. To Americans' credit, they're like that, and that what happens when you've got a group of people who are feeling that guilty and who want absolution that badly is they're willing to do almost anything to get that absolution, and that includes turning off reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Which we're not going
dangerous.
to do here at WJ Live or at the Western Journal. We have gone a little long today, but these are important topics and obviously important events going on. I hate to use the word unprecedented, but in some ways,
close.
What we are going through in terms of the election and the consequences of this election may indeed be unprecedented. We are going to be here every day at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific on WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal, to help you sort through those things. You can help us in two ways. One is free and one is not. The free one I'll go with first. Go to youtube.com/WJLive, youtube.com/WJLive. Click that subscribe button and then click that bell so you're notified when a new episode of WJ Live comes on, because we don't want you to miss it and you don't want to miss it. The other thing that you can do for us is check out westernjournal.com/join. We have a number of different subscription options, the Western Journal, available to you there. They're not free, but they might as well be. The benefits so outweigh the costs. I have yet to hear a single person, not one person, who has subscribed to the Western Journal and regretted it. I haven't heard a single complaint. So please check it out there. And then finally, I will add one more thing, because this seems to be the week of leaving social media platforms and going to Parler. We are on Parler, have been there for some time. It's at Parler, we are at the Western Journal, so you can find us there as well if you're one of the folks who are looking to get away from Facebook, get away from Twitter, get away from some of these other social media big tech tyrants. Parler is a way that a lot of folks are doing that. So find us there at the Western Journal, and we'll see you here on WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal, again tomorrow.
Hi, my name is Logan Harris, and I am co-director of WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. We have enjoyed recording WJ Live these past few weeks, and we have some exciting news.
We are now on Apple Podcasts, but we need to ask you a favor.
In order to equip even more readers with the truth and continue our fight against big tech, we're going to need more subscribers and reviews.
Go find WJ Live on Apple Podcasts, hit the subscribe button, and leave us a 5-star review.
Thank you for helping us out, and don't forget, you can catch a new episode of WJ Live every Tuesday and Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern and 2 p.m. Pacific on YouTube and now Apple Podcasts.